You are listening to the Gamer Librarian Podcast, the best podcast you can find on this side of the multiverse. I am your host, Adrian, and today I will be talking about the late Cormac McCarthy, City of Pearl by Karen Travis, the Xbox Showcase, and more. Afterwards, be sure to subscribe to be notified when future episodes are released, and show your support by liking and leaving a comment on what games and books I should talk about in the future. Thank you for joining. Before we get into today's main topics, there is something that I would like to talk about, and I just want to take a moment to remember the late author Cormac McCarthy, who died on the 13th earlier this week of natural causes. And this is an author that, while I'm not super experienced with, I've only read one of their novels, and that's The Road by Cormac McCarthy, and I absolutely loved it, and I'm sad to see him go. I would have liked to read more of his books before he had passed. I was always planning on reading Old Country for No Men, but I never really got around to doing that. Now, The Road is one of my favorite books. It's a post-apocalyptic uh, tale about a father and a son who are trying to go from coast to coast in, I believe, post-apocalyptic America, and you see all the trials and tribulations that they go through. And I found that book to be really harrowing and scary, and just one of the worst situations you could be, while also being really heartfelt and heartwarming, and really just one of the greatest books I ever read. It's really would be one of my top 10 if I put it up there. But I just want to take a minute to remember Cormac McCarthy as an author that I never knew personally, never really had much experience with besides the one book and seeing the movie for Old Country, for Old Men. And I think it's sad to see someone like that just pass. They were pushing up 60 or so, and they had a birthday which was in the 1930s when they were born, so they've been around for a good almost 100 years, just about. Um, it's pretty sad. That is sad to see, people go like that, but when it's their time, it's their time, and that's really something. But I hope he's resting well wherever he is, and I look forward to reading his books in the future. I'm going to definitely go ahead and read Old Country for No Men. That's definitely going to be something that's going to be on my list. If you haven't read The Road or Old Country or even seen the movie for either of those, I highly recommend because they're great tales. They're really one of the greatest stories you probably could read. Um, this goes to Cormac McCarthy. Now, the book that I've been reading and I finished earlier this week is City of Pearl by Karen Travis. And anybody who's a fan of video game novels or Star Wars novels probably know the name. Karen Travis is a prolific Star Wars writer in the past, and she's written for Gears of War, Halo, and many other media out there. And this is my first ever book reading of hers that is original, one of her original works. And I have to say, it blew me away. It captivated me entirely. It has nearly everything that I love about sci-fi. It has, cool sci-fi planets and aliens. It has cool uh, connotations of humanity in the future being on the precipice of whether or not we should be exploring the universe in the way that we do. Obviously, humans are so varied that we're not the same every single time. Um, to get into it, it's a book that follows the character Sean Franklin. She is a environmental hazard enforcement officer. The book takes place around the year 2200, like the 22,000s or so, and humanity has already been through various either wars or environmental disasters, and there's even prolific, prolonged environmental terrorists going off in the world. And the book doesn't take place on Earth for the most part. It takes place on another planet where Sean Franklin is sent to investigate a missing colony. And then the story quickly turns into a first contact story. And from there, it's just a wild ride because you really don't know what's going to happen. Um, to put it short, it's like a political first contact story. There isn't really like warfare or um, any other kind of conflict. There is like, shooting battles and like tension and stuff like that. But really, it's like a diplomatic kind of story where these people are representing humanity, and then they have to present humanity in a way that won't make the aliens mad at them or hate them. These significantly more advanced aliens. And that's just the crux of it. It comes down to where they have to start sharing a planet, which is very, very delicate. It's one of the closest to Earth like planets that they found in the book. And that really builds the tension and it really makes it um, really tense and exciting. Now, this book is similar to one of my favorite books, Speak of the Dead by Orson Scott Card, and it was great. It was similar in that way that it was treating all life as like sentient beings, like aliens and then like lesser kind of species like cows or algae, bacteria, viruses. It was really interesting. And it ends pretty well. This is a single story. You could probably take this as its own like front to back story, like end to finish kind of story. But there are sequels, and I haven't read them yet. The next in the order I think is Crossing the Line, and I'm gonna try and get that at some point. But this was a really great surprise read. I thought it was, gonna be something, relatively a little more mediocre, but I was enthralled by it. I was captivated by the main character Sean, who was this conflicted environmentalist kind of savior who at every turn she was getting opposition from like her coworkers and then obviously the aliens and then all kinds of stuff. Really, really phenomenal. Now, to get into the meat of today's episode, we have a lot to talk about because last, I think it was Sunday, was when Xbox had their 2023 Summer Showcase, and I think they came out really strong this year. I think that there was a lot for them to show off, even though some of the things were, things we already knew about, similar to Sony's stuff. But I think in terms of what we actually saw as a collection was pretty exciting. Now, the big one was Fable, at least for me. Fable is a beloved franchise from Xbox for quite a while. I really liked Fable 1, 2, and 3. I didn't play that Connect game that they had for it, and I think they even canceled some other game that was in the franchise sometime before this game was even announced. But they showed off slight like gameplay. It was like in engine, like a cinematic kind of trailer. It looked like it was in engine, like it was rendered, but it wasn't like proper gameplay as far as I could tell. Um, and it looks like to be like maybe a new world, something with like you play a smaller little like pixie kind of people, and then there's like more gigantic, more regular human size people. It was very odd to get that kind of gist from the trailer, but I'm excited. I hope that it doesn't forget all of their like roots with what made the franchise really great early on, not just like combat or exploration, but like the goofiness of that franchise, where you could fart on people, have like your own little store and marry people in the town and like have pranks on them. And it was really amped up in the later games with like the fashion kind of aspect of it with your armor and then the family dynamic with like the story from 3 or something. um, I'm excited. It's one of those games where it's exciting to see that they don't forget about it, which is really nice because Fable is a beloved franchise that should come back in some way, even if it maybe had like a less than mediocre kind of presence in the last few years. Um, Another big surprise was that we got 3 new Atlas game announcements. Atlas is the publisher behind the large franchise that is Persona and Shin Megami Tenshin, and they recently shown off 2 new Persona games, one being Persona 5 Tactica, which is like a Final Fantasy Tactics style Persona 5 game, probably a sequel to Persona 5 Strikers in some fashion, because that's also like canonized. And then there's Persona 3 Reload, which is apparently a full remaster, like a remake of Persona 3, but without the Persona 3 added on DLC from whenever they did their like little expansion game. Most Atlas games, at least for Persona, they have like the main game. For example, like this Persona 5, and then later on they'll do Persona 5 Royale, which is just the main game with even more content, some new characters, areas, stuff like that. And it seems like this doesn't have that, which is extremely odd. So maybe they'll have that as additional DLC, which I think is pretty bad as an idea. I think they should have just maybe remade the version with all the expansions for Persona 3. But who knows? I mean, it does look pretty good, at least in terms of the art style. I'm excited. I'm gonna try and actually beat Persona 3 and 4 at some point. Whenever I try and go back to Persona 4, I just kind of get like distracted from it. I don't know what it was. When I played Persona 5 for the first time, I was enthralled. Like I even had to restart that game once or twice because the combat was pretty difficult to like get used to with the daytime cycle and stuff like that. But I am excited to see what they do with the newer Persona games. And they had one more announcement, one more surprise announcement, which to me during the entire trailer it looked like a Shin Megami game. I never played those games. I know they recently just had um, I think it's a remake of Shin Megami 3, or maybe it's an entirely new game. I wasn't really privy or paying attention to that at the time, but Metaphor Re Fantazo, which is, I guess, their newest game. It looks very similar to Shin Megami. Let's be honest, it really does. But I'm excited. You know, that looks like a great art style. It has me enthralled by the trailer. It looks like your standard turn-based RPG game, which I think is going to be really great. Very excited to see what these newer announcements for Atlas play like. Now, to get off of Xbox for just a second, because we did have a cinematic trailer shown off for Star Wars Outlaws during the Xbox showcase. But then, about a few days later, we had the Ubisoft showcase, which I missed out entirely, but I got the main bullet points of it. And what we got from that showcase was the gameplay, more extended gameplay for Star Wars Outlaws, and it looks really great. It looks like the Star Wars 1313 that we were promised way back in like 2011, 2012, and it has things like cover-based combat, space battles, which seem really wild, and a very intricate-looking story, a la Jedi Survivor, and that kind of gimmick. It seems like you play as a more rogue, scoundrel kind of character in this game, and I'm excited. You know, I'm always a big fan of Star Wars, and I'm down for any Star Wars games that can come around. Um, Ubisoft did also show off actual gameplay for their Avatar game, Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. This is the Avatar game with the blue people, not the little boy with the blue arrow, to make the distinction. And I'm excited. This seems like another really good single player game that's going to be coming out from Ubisoft. And it's open world, first person. It has things like crafting, stealth, and all kinds of stuff. Big fan of Avatar and Pandora, the world. I really liked the movies. The second one was really amazing, really amazing. I saw it in theaters when it came out, and I was enthralled by it. I didn't even register it was like a 2.5 hour movie. I'm sad it ended the way it did because I wanted more. We're getting a third part to the whole franchise, and that's going to be really great. I think the Avatar video game is going to be one of the really special ones out there because it's a world that we're always dying to go back to, and we've only ever really gotten the movies from that. We did have an actual video game for it. Well, two decades ago, whenever the first game came out, and that was okay. That game was all right. I never really played extensive months of it, but I got a little bit of the gameplay at some time, and I remember it being pretty decent for a movie game at the time. You know, it was one of the last movie games we ever really got. But Ubisoft came out swinging for quite a bit. I think they even shown off some more extended Assassin's Creed stuff, which is decent. To get back on the Xbox, they did show off some more of Senna's Hellblade 2, which I didn't finish the first game. I plan on going back to it probably around when this game comes out. That does look like a really great title that they have on their shoulders. Another title that they announced was a new Yakuza game. This is part of the Yakuza Like a Dragon franchise called Infinite Wealth. For anybody who doesn't know, Yakuza is a little bit like Japan's GTA, but it's like a turn-based RPG. You're not really gonna go around driving and running people over and doing malicious stuff. It's usually, at least from the one that I played, the first Like a Dragon, it was the only Yakuza game I ever played. It's definitely a little more on the goofy side, like your Saints Row kind of game. There's no driving as far as I've seen, but you go around. You have turn-based battles with like various enemies and companions, and you do all kinds of wacky stuff in the in the Yakuza games. It's really a treat. I was surprised when I first played it because I got it free on the PlayStation Gold game stuff, and I gotta finish it. I have to finish the first game. It gets hard at some points, like any RPG, but the second game seems really great. It was only a like an in-game trailer of the main character like waking up naked on a beach. I think it's like Hawaii or something. That looks very fun. I'm very excited to get my hands into that game again. Now, to get into the big elephant in the room, the game that I think is probably the most anticipated title since Cyberpunk 2077, at least in my eyes, at least in games that I think is probably going to be a pinnacle release for the game industry, is Starfield. And what we do know is that Microsoft paid a billion billions of dollars for just the company of Bethesda. And with that, they got a plethora of games. They got Fallout, Elder Scrolls. They even got the id Company and their Doom and Wolfenstein and those kind of games. Not only that, but they got what I imagine was already in production by the time Microsoft had fully completed their deal with Bethesda. I'm not sure how far along in development it was, but it's clear that now that because they bought Bethesda, this game is now a Xbox hard exclusive, and that's Starfield. Starfield to me is like the No Man's Sky meets Outer Worlds Fallout game, and it looks like it's going to meet that kind of expectation. Obviously, it's a Bethesda game, and most recently, Microsoft games don't really have, very good launches as of late. So we could imagine this game will probably start off a little rocky within the first few weeks of its release. That being said, it is going to be 30 frames per second on the Xbox brand consoles, and I'm imagine on PC it's probably going to vary because every PC game is different. And I gotta say, it's looking really good. From what they showed off at this recent showcase, it has everything that you would imagine a Bethesda game would have. It has crafting, it brings back the base building from Fallout 4, it has like dialogue options, talk to characters, a character creator, and more than anything, it is what seemingly the largest Bethesda game ever made because it's going to have extensive universal galaxy space exploration. We'll be going from planet to planet, hopefully space stations and other small little nooks and crannies across this new and vast universe for Bethesda. You can the combat looks really great. You can board ships mid battle and like fight in them and then take over the ships. That's an interview with Todd Howard talking to a IGN interviewer, and he mentions that while he was in a sandstorm, he boarded an enemy vessel that landed. He started shooting up the place, and while they were in a firefight, the ship actually took off planet, which seems crazy, absolutely crazy that they even have like a mechanic like that or the system works like that. I hope it does. I hope that all the systems that they shown off and they talk about work well together because this looks like a great game. And knowing Bethesda, they make great games. They made the highly coveted Elder Scrolls Skyrim, which seems like a pipe dream of something to try and recreate again. And that's what the next game is going to be. In that interview I mentioned, um, Todd Howard does mention that the next game truly is going to be Elder Six or Elder Scrolls Six, at least for the foreseeable future. But I think Xbox's future truly lies on Starfield. It absolutely does lie on Starfield because we've seen games like this come and go many times. Most notably, Like I said, it's like a No Man's Sky similar game. That game had a very, very rocky and tumultuous launch with lies and things that weren't on launch date that they were promised, which is something to say because that game is now what is considered a great comeback story. Absolutely. I mean, that game turned it around in the later years of its launch. And I think anybody can say that that game earned the right for that, for us to say that it earned that. You know, whether or not you think it's a great game for what its content offers, I never went back and played it. When it launched, it only had like exploration. It didn't have quests besides like the main base story, which was very minimal. It was like collecting like little hieroglyphic stuff. It didn't have space battles. It had arduous crafting, not even co-op, and that game turned it around from what I've been hearing online and everything in the last few years. People have adored No Man's Sky in the recent years. Very, very good for them. And I think Starfield is the same kind of game, and it's probably in the same time of boat, but it has a much different pedigree because it's coming from what you could arguably say is one of the top leading video game developers and publishers coming out of modern times. You know, No Man's Sky developer was fairly new, and Bethesda has so many games under their belt that the pedigree and the weight on their shoulders is really high. Now, what really interested me in this game was that they have like ship building, like ship crafting, and it looks crazy, absolutely crazy. They have one little like snippet of a ship that looks like something straight out of Breath of the Wild, like some hodgepodge piece of absolute monstrosity, and I'm all for that. I'm excited for that. You know, I love sci-fi. I'm gonna eat this game up. I really am. I trust Bethesda. I really do. I I think that, you know, in the recent years their titles have been pretty good. Skyrim obviously, and then Fallout 4 was definitely a good Fallout game. It may have not maybe had the same kind of love or praise as Fallout 3 or New Vegas, but I still think Fallout 4 is a pretty good game, story wise, gameplay wise, and it's still the most recent Fallout game that you could play like on PC, so all the mods are pretty great. It's the best looking Fallout game. And then we obviously get Fallout 76, which is is a game. It's maybe not a game for the single player in me or the single players out there. Fallout 76 is definitely more of your MMO kind of experience, which isn't bad. You can still play it single player, but um, it's just not something that I would be interested in. I tried playing on Game Pass, and it really bogs down the same experience that you've had for the same Fallout games. And I don't think that's the issue that we're going to see with Starfield, even though it does have like outpost building and crafting, like your ships. It's not going to be an online game. This is going to be entirely single player, which I think is great. I think it's great that we're getting more single player games because not everything needs to be a co-op or massive multiplayer experience. Not everything really needs to be that way. And I think Bethesda knows that that's what they're great at doing. That's what they're really really great at doing is giving us solid single player experiences for hundreds of hours and potential multiple playthroughs and even in the span of like mods and stuff. I really hope that Starfield gets the real treatment that any Bethesda game deserves, just like Fallout 3 or 4 or Skyrim. I think that, you know, if Bethesda and Microsoft play their cards right, this could be a flagship game for them, a new game setter. And that's probably what they have to strive for, you know, after Halo Infinite and the other Bethesda game, Redfield or the vampire game that came out on Game Pass that had like a horrendous launch. That definitely left a sour taste in people's mouths because obviously the next like big fail game that we imagine is Cyberpunk 76, which I will talk about in just a few coming up because it's gonna have some DLC which I want to talk about. But yeah, Starfield seems really great. You know, I'm really excited to see more about it, and it comes out I think September this year. So you can absolutely expect me to get that game day one. Even bugs and all, I might get on my Series S, or maybe at the time if I have a Series X or a better PC. Here's hoping. But Starfield is definitely a game that I'm highly, highly looking forward to. Now, I did say I was going to talk about Cyberpunk because Cyberpunk is another game that did have a rocky launch, and it's seeming like it's turning around, and for better or worse, depending on maybe what console you're playing on. I know that people who got it on the Xbox One, PS4 era, I think are absolutely getting burned. They're probably not getting the DLC. I think content for that is probably entirely halted. But it seems like the DLC is going to offer some lot more content for us to go back into that game. And I'm excited to do that because I want a reason to go back and experience that game, go back and see what kind of bugs they fixed and everything like that. Cyberpunk for me definitely wasn't the game I thought it was going to be. It definitely didn't have a lot of the content or the same experience that I would have wanted. It kind of felt to me like a GTA game mixed with Fallout kind of mechanics, and it really didn't have that. That's not to say that it can't do that in the future. You know, obviously, at the time when that game came out, there was a worldwide event happening, and you can't blame them for, you know, trying to get the game out when they did and putting it out in the state they did, um, because it in to show that like No Man's Sky can do it, I think Cyberpunk 2077 can do it, and that they can really turn it around. And this isn't a game that needs a sequel. It's not. It's not a game that needs a sequel. It's a game that probably just needs a little more tweaks and some more content updates into something that can make the game really stand out later on, with hopefully people getting mods into it and things like that. And it just makes me hopeful. I like to see games have comeback stories. It's sad to see games just kind of start and then just fizzle away and be forgotten about, which is kind of what they seem to be doing with Halo Infinite. Now, I said that it's Starfield is Microsoft's future, and you would think it would be Halo, but it seemed like they just completely forgot about Halo. I mean, that's just baffling to me that they released Halo the way it was. I mean, the campaign was absolute garbage. No co-op for that campaign, no firefight. Multiplayer maps were pretty mid, and they barely even had any game modes. And the battle pass and the leveling up was fucking atrocious. You would think for a game that's free to play, you'd have a better model and stuff like that. But man, they need Starfield to succeed. They absolutely need to. I'm gonna stop talking about Starfield for now because um, I don't want to wear myself out before that game comes out, and there's still more things to talk about, like the recently dropped Lies of P demo, which is the spiritual successor to Bloodborne. I believe it's made by a Korean studio, and I played it, and it plays like a heavier, slower, uh, kind of clunkier version of Bloodborne, at least from the demos feel. But it definitely feels like a Bloodborne game. It definitely feels like Bloodborne. It has that bones of Bloodborne. And that's great. That's really cool. It's a cool puppet like world a la Pinocchio with these animatronic enemies and all kinds of weird other creatures and even magic. It has like weapon arts for like your abilities, and your weapons do different like kind of attacks and stuff. I only got to the one boss in the game, and that was in the demo, and that was pretty fun. You definitely have to think about how you strike and attack and approach in this game, but it was very fun, and I'm excited to see this game when it fully releases because I intend on playing it fully. It's definitely nice to see games like Lies of P and Wulong, which is like a Neo successor, really take strides in the Souls genre because with FromSoft kind of stepping away from the Soulsborne series into their Armor Core stuff, there's definitely a gap to be made before we get any Elden Ring DLC. Now there is another demo that came out that is the Final Fantasy 16 demo, and I will say I'm going to pass on that only because FF16 is already so close away. I believe it comes out on the 22nd of this month, and I already pre-ordered it. I think it's like 5 days away from what my my PS5 said I would get it to be playing it, and I love Final Fantasy. I love Final Fantasy because, well, maybe people have different opinions on each game. I think each game, from the main 16 titles to its spin-offs, has something valuable to them. I mean, if you look at the first six Final Fantasy games, where it's truly like 8 16-bit pixel art, turn-based combat. I mean, that's like as RPG as you can get. That's like the roots of the genre. That's a video game. Video games were RPGs like that. And then you get into Final Fantasy VII with its 3D polygon models and its intricate storytelling. Not the crack on any other stories for Final Fantasy, but I think Final Fantasy VII story absolutely is the pinnacle of its storytelling. Final Fantasy 9 was just the same. Or I'm sorry, Final Fantasy 8 and 9 were the same, just better graphics, better story. 10 took it up a notch with its graphics and its exploration, kinda, and its in-depth battle system. 11 was the first shot at an MMO, and that seemed to do pretty well because after the launch of Final Fantasy 12 and 13, there is another Final Fantasy MMO, which is had another rocky start. We're getting into a big trend of things that had kind of lukewarm starts and then really hard comeback stories. Final Fantasy XIV Realm Reborn is now the most highly played MMO in the world. It trumped World of Warcraft like 4 years ago, and I hope it keeps that spot forever because it deserves it. It absolutely deserves it. 15 was okay. I've played 15 at launch, and it definitely felt like a game that was missing content. I know that the game has DLC now, and I have a copy of it on the PS5 with all its DLC, so I'm going to be playing that at some point. But for now, it's going to be FF16 as soon as that comes out. Now, I want to give a small update on my experience with Street Fighter 6 because I did recently just finish the story mode of that game, and it's pretty difficult for a single player scrub like me. You know, a guy who's never really given too much attention to fighting games or tried to learn them all that well. I've always did used to go and do the story mode or the arcade mode once and never again, and then just maybe try online. Um, and then I would mostly just do like arcade mode and battle with friends and all that kind of stuff just by myself. But the story mode is pretty good. You know, I didn't do all the side quests. I didn't unlock all the characters and the options just because my playthrough was already pushing like 70 hours, and that's too much for a fighting game. That's too much for a fighting game single player mode, and that's not even counting the amount of time that I finished on the multiplayer for this game, the arcade mode and stuff like that. The single player stuff took me like 60 hours, and it was difficult. It was difficult for the most part. Some of the fights were pretty unfair. You have to play the game kind of like an RPG survival game. You have items which heal your health and give you buffs and stuff. So you get to enjoy yourself a little bit without just feeling like it's a grind. That was really great, really great, and it's cute. It's a game that has personality. I mean, it's aware. It's aware that like these are characters that have been around for a while, and they're introducing new characters and new and familiar areas, and it has to be full of flair and exotic and interesting. And I think it absolutely captivates that. I mean, no matter what you're doing, you're unlocking like art pieces and stuff. You know, whether it's a cutscene from the story mode, or if you do it the arcade mode, you get a bunch of bunch of art just by finishing it. And I love that. I love that. Um, I've been playing a lot of Cammy online, occasionally going through practice mode and doing the trials, and then trying to do casual matches and then ranked matches, just trying to get experience with her. You know, she's really fun. I like how fast she is. I like her mix-ups with her like lariat cross moves with like the what is it? The down quarter circle forward punch motion where she like does a flip in the air and she could grab you midair or do like a kick downward or just land hard or like slide. A hooligan something. Yeah, I'm awful with these names. I don't partake in fighting games like this, so I've never really like been good at knowing the moves and stuff. But I love her. Her air grab is really great. I'm just having fun playing her. You know, I got into Iron rank 5 star, I think. Like it's the one right before you get to bronze, and I'm really trying to get to bronze. Um, but it's really fun. I fought more juries and Kens, so I have like a lot more experience fighting them, and it's just been a really great time. I'm really gonna try and play this game off and on between releases and between other games I'm gonna be playing, reading books, especially in between when Mortal Kombat 1. Gotta catch myself because when I think about Mortal Kombat 1, I just think, oh, that's just 11. There's two ones. Mortal Kombat 1 comes out, and hopefully Tekken 8 will come out this year. It's certainly the year of fighting games, and that's has me very, very excited. If anybody else is playing Street Fighter 6 right now, let me know what fighters you're playing as. Did you beat the story mode? Are you interested in learning more characters, or are you just gonna play your original character from story mode, like online in the Battle Hub? I haven't really done that yet, but I'm pretty excited to do that in the future. Now, the last thing I want to talk about this episode is last night I went and bought Diablo 4 on the PS5, and I chose a Necromancer as my class, and I've currently only been doing like for the first hour and a half or so, but you can bet as soon as this episode is out, I will be going back and playing Diablo 4 so I can give you guys my full thoughts on it later on in some next episode because I'm a big Diablo fan. I never really played a lot of Diablo 1 and 2, but I definitely played my fair share of Diablo 3, and that game, for all its quirks and maybe issues you might have with it, I think it's a phenomenal RPG game. Absolutely. That game is harrowing. I played on the PC when it launched, and I never did a DLC until I got it for the Switch, and I finally busted through it. That was really, really great. Now, that's probably all I got for this episode. I'm probably thinking this is going to be about 20 to 30 minutes long. I'm really trying to find a good way to balance out the length of the episode versus content. And I think I'm getting a little sick. I kind of feel a little congested, like my throat is a little sore. So I apologize if you guys can hear that on your end. But yeah, thank you for joining me. This has been episode 13 of the Gamer Librarian podcast. Be sure to subscribe for updates on future episode releases. Leave a like and comment on what games and books I should talk about in the future. Thank you and see you next time.